Kunan is a young aristocrat from a prominent family in the kingdom, and you'd think his life would be great, but take a look at his family sitting all around him. Well, that's something he can't do because he's blind. He possesses something known as the hero's scar, so ever since the day of his birth, he has been completely blind, and that has made him really depressed. His personal maid, Eiko, has to lead him everywhere he goes, but to give Kunan something to do, she encourages him to learn magic. After all, he does have a water magic crest, so it would be a waste if he didn't learn how to use it. He is introduced to his magic tutor, Jenny, and she says it's nice to finally see Kunan in the flesh. She introduces herself, and they start their first magic lesson for the day, a basic water ball spell. After teaching Kunan the incantation, he gives it a try and is able to create a small water ball. Jenny is impressed with Kunan's performance and says she can see that he has a high aptitude, but Kunan can't see anything, so he asks her to tell him what just happened. Jenny explains that he succeeded in creating a water ball around the size of an eyeball, but that was a really poor choice of words. She is worried that she might have offended him, but Kunan just came to the realization that magic can be eyeball-shaped, and if he learns enough of it, he might be able to make new eyes for himself. With newfound hope that he may one day gain his vision, Kunan becomes intrigued about the world around him and starts trying to learn as much as he can. Kunan's ancestor, the hero of this nation, Histor, defeated the demon lord, but he lost an arm and a leg in the battle. And since then, every so often, his descendants would be born with something missing, whether it be an arm, a leg, or eyesight. Which is crazy because imagine getting hurt so bad that your descendants end up suffering your injuries with you. Kunan may have lost the genetic lottery, but he's not going to let that hold him back any longer. He swears he's going to find a way to make new eyes for himself with magic, but practicing magic is actually really hard. He runs out of stamina after casting a few basic spells, and if he wants to create new eyes for himself, he can't stay like this, so he needs to find a way to strengthen his body. Normally, running would be a good way to raise stamina, but Kunan isn't exactly equipped for that, so Eiko suggests he could do some sword training instead, and she even has the perfect instructor in mind. Kunan spends the next few hours training with Master Oro to raise his stamina, and after that, Jenny arrives to continue her magic lessons with him. She can see that Kunan has been working hard with a sword, so she asks him if he wants to take a break since he would probably be tired from all the training, but he tells her he wants to keep going. In that case, Jenny suggests they should start by reviewing the water spell she taught him last time, but while she was expecting Kunan's progress to be the same as last time, to her surprise, he immediately creates 7 flawless water balls all at once, and she knows she did not teach him that. Meanwhile, over in the royal palace, Princess Marika has just been informed that a carriage has been prepared for her to go visit Kunan, but she doesn't really want to go. Kunan and Marika were betrothed to each other since he was born with the hero's scar, so it's an important political marriage, but she doesn't think Kunan likes her at all. She visits him every now and then so they can get to know each other, but he always acts so gloomy around her, and no matter how hard she tries to cheer him up, he would always say nothing matters because he's blind and can't do anything by himself. Even so, Marika's maid tells her she still has to go see him, so she eventually agrees and heads over to Kunan's home. However, this time, when she meets him, he seems much happier than he was the last time she saw him. She asks him if something happened to him recently, so Kunan explains that he recently fell in love with magic and has given him hope again. He apologizes for always being so gloomy around Marika, and he asks her if she'd like to listen to some of his stories, since he has been learning a lot of fun things recently. By the end of the day, Marika leaves Kunan's house, and this time, she actually had a lot of fun playing with him, so she can't wait for her next visit. Later that night, back at Jenny's apartment, she's freaking out because she doesn't know what to teach Kunan for his next lesson. She took this job because she thought it would be easy money teaching a 7-year-old elementary magic for a few years, but after a few lessons, Kunan already mastered it. She wonders if she should start teaching him intermediate magic, but she can't risk doing that because while magic is convenient, it's not necessarily safe, so she might get in trouble for teaching him dangerous spells so soon. However, she's not going to give up yet because she's got bills to pay, and she's going to come up with a perfectly safe lesson for Kunan so she can keep collecting her paycheck. The next day, when Kunan and Jenny meet, she tells him that today's lesson is going to be a little different. He has already mastered the water ball, but that is a compound spell, so she wants him to try learning to adjust the various aspects of it. Kunan assumes she's talking about how he creates water, makes it float in the air, and maintains its ball shape mid-air, and she tells him he's right, but there's a lot more to it. Things like temperature, flavor, and color can also be adjusted, and to demonstrate, she creates 2 water balls in front of him. When he touches them, he notices that one is cold while the other is warm, and he seems to understand the concept that Jenny is trying to explain, so he decides to give it a try. Jenny is shocked to hear him say that, because she came up with this lesson intending to have him spend the next few weeks learning it, but just from her explanation, he already understands the basics of the technique and was even able to create juice-flavored water. Granted, it's still really hard for him to do, so he's going to need to practice a lot. The next day, Iko is getting ready to prepare a drink for him, so she asks Kunan to make some hot water for her, and he does so, but as he is sending the water over, Kunan sees the bowl of apples underneath it, and then wait a minute, Kunan just saw those apples. He panics and drops the water because this is the first time he has ever seen something, but when Iko asks him if that means his eyes are working, he explains that that isn't the case. It's more like he was able to use his magic to identify the object, which is an astounding development because it brings him one step closer to his goal of creating eyes with magic. Right now, all he can do is differentiate the red apples from the green ones, but he still has no idea what most colors actually look like, so he's going to have to do a lot of practice to get used to this. A little while later, Iko goes to report the good news to Kunan's father, and he is shocked to learn that Kunan can actually see now. Iko explains that he can only see within a small range near his body with his magic, but he can identify colors easily, so it's as good as regular vision. He is also able to read books now by tracing the colors of the pictures. He still can't understand words yet since he never learned how to read as a kid, but it's only a matter of time before he gets the hang of it, and Kunan's father is glad to hear it. Later that day, Kunan is getting ready for his usual magic lesson with Jenny, but while he's waiting for her to arrive, he gets an idea and decides to surprise Jenny by showing off how much his magic has improved. To do this, he creates a massive ball of red water in the air, and Iko thinks it looks beautiful, but a moment later, his family comes to check on him. And Kunan is so excited to see them that he loses control of the water ball and splashes it all over himself and Iko. Kunan's mother is horrified by the sight of him in this state, but he doesn't understand what the big deal is since he is just covered in a bunch of red water. Iko explains to him that the color red can be a bit unsettling to most people because it's the same color as human blood, but Kunan had no idea that blood was red to begin with. Kunan spends most of his free time reading and his father has taken notice, so he calls Kunan's brother, Ixio, into his office to tell him about his plans. He tells Ixio that he's thinking of sending Kunan to school now that he can take care of himself, but he is going to need Ixio to look after him as much as possible as his older brother. Sometime later, Kunan is summoned to the main branch to meet his father, but he's not sure what this is about since he hasn't done anything bad recently. When he finally meets his father, he says he has a very important announcement to make. According to Kunan's tutor, he has already finished most of the subject material taught at the school for noble children, even though he has never actually been to school. He was wondering if Kunan is curious about what going to school in person feels like, but Kunan says he's not particularly interested in attending school. After all, he wouldn't want to be a burden on his classmates, and he has his own goals he wants to achieve. He asks his dad if it's a problem that he doesn't wish to attend school, and it kind of is because school is mandatory for all noble children, and technically, Kunan is already enrolled, at least on paper. But due to his unique circumstances, his father got the king to make a special exception for him. However, now that Kunan has learned to see well enough to move about on his own, his father thinks it's time for him to consider going back to school. Kunan asks if he's trying to get rid of him because of the red water incident, and Kunan's dad is still a bit upset about it, but that's not the reason. He's saying this for the sake of Princess Marika, because if Kunan doesn't go to school, then it will make him look bad to the other nobles, and even if he isn't worried about his public image, as Marika's future husband, any negative opinions about him would affect her as well. Kunan understands the point his father is trying to make, so he agrees to go to school, but he still thinks it's going to be a waste of time since there's nothing new for him to learn there. His father tells him he doesn't actually have to attend classes. He just needs to pass all the advancement exams needed to qualify for graduation, and since he has already completed the syllabus with his tutor, it should be easy for him to pull off. A little while later, Kunan meets with Marika to inform her that he will be attending school soon, and she's really excited because that means she will get to spend more time with him at school. But Kunan is a little worried since if Marika is with him all the time, then all the boys who have crushes on her will get jealous, and they might take it out on him. Marika tells him he will probably be fine, but to be honest, that didn't sound very reassuring, so Kunan thinks he should probably get a new wand for self-defense. On the day of departure, Kunan and Ixio get into a carriage to leave for the academy, but to make the ride a little smoother, Kunan casts water magic on the wheels to act as shock absorbers. Ixio is impressed by how much Kunan's magic has improved, but Kunan says he has just become a little stronger, so it's not a big deal. He also apologizes since he's sure he must have worried his brother a lot with how depressed he was before, but now he is determined to survive no matter what, so Ixio doesn't need to worry about him anymore. Ixio is glad that Kunan has changed for the better, but then Kunan says he will make sure he succeeds even if it means the rest of the world has to perish, and that's crossing into villain territory. So Ixio is a bit worried again. They eventually arrive at the school, and Kunan can hear the voices of dozens of new people all at once. In the past, he would have backed out immediately without giving it a try, but not anymore. He asks Mirka to take his hand as the two of them walk into the building, and near the entrance, there's a professor waiting to meet him. Cass was asked to act as Kunan's guide and proctor for the advancement exams, but she's a bit worried because she has heard rumors about Kunan being a shy and reserved boy, and she's not sure how to handle someone like him who refuses to socialize. But to her surprise, a moment later, she sees Kunan and walk by with Mirka and Ixio, and they all seem to be chatting normally. She catches up to them and introduces herself as the professor who's going to be in charge of Kunan today, and Kunan says it's a pleasure to meet her. The bell rings soon after, so Mirka and Ixio have to go to their respective classes now. So Mirka says goodbye to Kunan and tells him to meet her in the cafeteria for lunch once he's done with his exams. Meanwhile, from the second floor, Mirka's older brother has been watching her, and he can see how happy she is with Kunan, so he could be supportive of her. But nah, he wants to be a hater, so he intends to confront Kunan the moment he finds him. Meanwhile, Kunan has just arrived in his exam room, and Cast is explaining the basics to him. There are 5 exams he needs to take, and normally, these exams are spread out to give students time to prepare, but an exception was made, so he will be allowed to take the tests back to back. Kunan apologizes to her for the trouble since his father and the king are practically best friends, so they probably pulled a bunch of strings to force the school to make an exception for him. Kunan then goes on a tangent about how close his father and the king are, but she really doesn't want to hear all this, since she prefers to stay out of the politics of high society. After the tests are complete, Cast heads to the faculty room to grade them, and she thought she was going to have to fudge Kunan's scores a little to make sure he passes since the king is backing him, but he actually aced every single test on his own, and for someone who has skipped school up till now, that doesn't make any sense. After the test, Kunan meets up with Mirka, and the two of them are about to have lunch together when all of a sudden, Lyle cuts them off. Mirka seems scared of her brother since he has violent tendencies, but Kunan has no idea that Lyle is Mirka's brother, and frankly, he doesn't care, because if he's making Mirka upset, then he's got to go. Kunan was about to make a move against Lyle, but just then, Ixio showed up and gets in front of him to try and smooth things over. He politely asks Lyle to leave Kunan and Mirka alone, and there's not much else he can do since he can't risk being rude to the 6th prince of the kingdom. However, while Lyle was yelling at Ixio, Kunan secretly cast a spell and gathered water droplets around the crotch of Lyle's pants before acting oblivious and yelling, "Oh no, Prince Lyle just peed his pants." Everyone's eyes instantly point towards Lyle's crotch, and even though he denies peeing on himself, the evidence is pretty damning, so to save himself from further humiliation, he is forced to leave. Ixio and Mirka are relieved that Lyle is gone now, but they both know Kunan had to be the one behind the pee thing. But Kunan avoids the question and changes the subject, asking what the others would like for lunch. After they've sat down, Kunan asks the others if they know why Lyle was making such a big fuss for no reason earlier, and Mirka tells him it was probably to keep her in check. Lyle is the 6th prince, while she is the 9th princess, so she is below him in the royal hierarchy, but since she is engaged to Kunan, a sorcerer who possesses the hero scar, it puts her in a much higher standing status-wise. He probably feels threatened by the idea of Mirka surpassing him in the hierarchy, so he was trying to establish dominance, but he's not necessarily a bad person. Kunan kind of feels like he may have overdone it earlier, so he wonders if he should apologize for what he did, but the others immediately shut down the idea and tell him Lyle got what he deserved after the stunt he pulled today. Time goes by, and back home, Kunan has started learning how to change the texture of ice to make it feel like other things. This time, he made the ice feel like an apple, and his teacher is impressed, but she tells him he should try feeling more things so he can use different textures. The day for the final exam soon rolls around, and upon arriving at school for the day, Ixio notices that Kunan has been touching the horse a lot recently. He asks what that's all about, and Kunan responds, saying he's just gathering some samples, but Ixio has no idea what that's supposed to mean. A little while later, Mirka shows up to greet Kunan, and he tells her he's going to miss being able to talk to her at school all the time since this will be his last day here. But Mirka reminds him that they've still got the whole day ahead of them, so there's no need to say goodbye yet. They all head into the exam room, and Kunan is excited because this is his first time actually being in a class with other students. But he's also going to miss all the private time he used to spend with Professor Cast back when he took his tests. Cast tells him she's still going to be paying attention to him even if there are other students here, and Ixio notices that Kunan and Cast seem to have gotten really close. Kunan says it's natural that they would become friends since he learned a lot about Cast through their discussions during Kunan's tests. Like how Cast only became a teacher here because she had a crush on one of the men who applied for the role, but the guy ended up failing while Cast passed, so she didn't know what to do and decided to just keep teaching. The others think it's good that Kunan and Professor Cast are getting along, but they also think it's a bit weird for her to be venting about her love life to a child. Just then, a bunch of the other kids in class approach the group and ask Ixio and Mirika to introduce them to Kunan since they haven't had a chance to talk to him yet, and since they are being so straightforward. Kunan formally introduces himself. Truth be told, he was a little concerned about the fact that no one ever approached him when he was with Ixio or Mirika, so he was starting to think the two of them had no friends at all. Mirika tells him that her friends only kept their distance because she told them she wanted to spend some quality time with him without being bothered, and Kunan is relieved to hear that because he wouldn't know what to do if Mirika or Ixio ended up being total loners. That said, he personally doesn't mind being alone or having no friends, so it wouldn't bother him that much. A little while later, the exam is about to begin, but Lyle is still out in the hallway, staring out the window and acting all cool and mysterious. His lackeys tell him that the final exam is about to begin, and Lyle says he's too important to be worried about something like that, but then they remind him that he will have to repeat the year if he misses it, so he has no choice. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, Kunan is busy feeling up a pigeon next to the windows when Cast announces that the test is about to begin, so everyone should take their seats. Mirika tells Kunan she saved him a seat next to her, but before he could accept her offer, Lyle gets in between them and starts staring daggers at Kunan. Ixio can't interfere, but he recalls hearing a few of the royal maids talking about how much of a screw-up Lyle is, but they would never say that to his face because he is still a member of the royal family. The reason Lyle acts out so much and is always so angry is because he knows that even though people try to act respectful around him, they all probably make fun of him behind his back. However, while he's in the middle of his thoughts, Kunan suddenly grabs his hand and formally introduces himself. Lyle freaks out and says he didn't give permission for Kunan to touch him, but Kunan reminds him that they are going to be brothers-in-law eventually, so they should get to know each other. He starts feeling Lyle's hand, and from the texture of his skin, Kunan can tell that Lyle must have a handsome face. That was a nice thing to say, but Lyle rarely ever receives genuine compliments like this, so he doesn't know how to handle it and turns to Mirika to ask her if there's something wrong with Kunan. Mirika finds the whole thing funny, and so does everyone else in class, so they start laughing, and at first, Lyle thinks they are all laughing at him. But Mirika explains that they are laughing because this is the first time anyone has ever seen him get so flustered. Lyle denies being flustered and tells Kunan to let go of his hand already, but Kunan holds on for a few extra seconds and tells Lyle his voice sounds strong too. Lyle initially didn't like Kunan and was planning to be mean to him to assert dominance, but now he's not sure how to react. Cass then gets everyone's attention and tells them all to be seated because she's about to begin the test. By the end of the day, the test is completed and Cass has finished grading everyone's papers, so she says she's going to announce the results now. She begins writing on the board, and everyone eagerly watches to see their results, but it turns out that they all passed, so they all get to graduate. Afterwards, Kunan and Ixio get back on the carriage to head home, and everyone waves goodbye to him as he leaves. Kunan tells them he had a lot of fun today, and he tells Cass that if she's still looking for a boyfriend, then she should consider Ixio since he's still single, but Ixio says he never agreed to that, and Cass is starting to regret talking to Kunan about her love life a little. Additionally, Lyle learned a lot from his interaction with Kunan, and he's going to make an effort to be nicer from now on. A few days later, now that Kunan has graduated, he is focusing on learning some new spells, and Jenny is currently testing him on everything he has learnt. She asks him to make a spinning ball of water, split it into 10, and then color and texture each one individually, all of which Kunan is able to pull off with little difficulty. Jenny tells him he did well, but Kunan says he's not done yet because he actually figured out how to take the customization even further. He then proceeds to turn one of the water balls into a dove and has it fly into the air. Jenny can't believe what she just witnessed and falls to her knees because even master water mages wouldn't be able to pull off something like that so easily. Later, while having tea with Kunan, Jenny says she has something important to tell him. Kunan understands, so he asks Aiko to give them some privacy. And once they are alone, Jenny tells him that there's nothing left for her to teach him. In fact, she hasn't had much to teach for the past few months since she's just meant to instruct him in the use of elementary magic. But at this point, Kunan is a better mage than she is, so there's no reason for her to continue being his teacher. Kunan gets up and tells her that she's actually a great teacher because he has really enjoyed all the desperate little tricks that she would turn into lessons for him. She may not be on the level of more advanced mages, but her insight gave him new hope in life, and he truly values it. Jenny appreciates him, saying that since she had to work really hard and rack her brain to come up with those lessons, and it is becoming too much for her to handle. Kunan asks her if she's saying this because she thinks the salary isn't worth all the trouble, because if that's the case, he asks his father to give her a pay raise. But Jenny tells him it's actually the opposite. She feels guilty about receiving such a high salary when she does so little. Kunan tells her that the lessons she comes up with are worth every penny, but Jenny says she's already hit her limit. Her brain is bone dry when it comes to ideas now, so she tells him he deserves to have a better sorcerer as his teacher instead of her. Kunan begs Jenny to stay because he wants to continue having her as his magic teacher, but there really isn't much she can do for him at this point. After saying goodbye, Jenny leaves the mansion, and as she is walking away, she thinks to herself that Kunan is undoubtedly a genius, and it's only a matter of time before he becomes one of the greatest mages on the continent, so she's going to do her best to keep up with him by training her own magic. The next morning, Kunan is informed by Iko that his usual academic tutor, Miss Flora, has just resigned as well. He's shocked to hear this, but it does make sense since he has already finished the curriculum and graduated from the Noble Academy, so he doesn't need to be tutored anymore. Kunan still wishes he had gotten to say goodbye before she left, so he decides to write her a thank you letter later. And Iko thinks that's great, but while Kunan is at it, she asks if he could ask Flora if she knows any 20-year-old single men who would be interested in marrying her. Kunan feels hurt that Iko wants to get married and leave him behind, and she's not trying to make him feel bad, but she does need to think about her future as well. Besides, she's sure that Kunan will be alright on his own, but he says he's not alright at all. Jenny already left, he just found out that Flora resigned, and now Iko wants to leave as well. At this rate, he won't have anyone left soon. That night, during dinner, Kunan tells his father about Jenny quitting and how she said he should find a master sorcerer to become his teacher if he wants to continue learning. Ixio thinks about it for a second and recalls a rumor about an extraordinary royal sorcerer. Their mother recognizes the description and asks Ixio if he is talking about Xanil Finral, because he is famous throughout the capital for his immense power and good looks. He would be a perfect candidate for Kunan's new magic teacher, but their father says there's a major problem with that plan. They can't hire Xio. As a royal sorcerer, the only people allowed to give him orders are the king and other members of the royal court. On top of that, Xio rarely leaves the royal castle, and even meeting with him is highly regulated, so the chances of hiring him as a magic instructor are slim, but he says he will at least ask the king to see if there's anything he can do. A little while later, the Grand Master Mage at the royal castle receives a report that says an apprentice-level sorcerer boy is asking to study under one of his royal sorcerers. This is practically unheard of, even for the son of a noble who is best friends with the king. The Grand Master's apprentice happens to be Mirika's older sister, so she personally does like Kunan, but royal sorcerers aren't swayed by status or power. The Grand Master initially intended to reject the request regardless of how well connected Kunan is, but then he started reading Kunan's file and that's when he realized this. This kid might actually be special. This was the end of episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part.